All right, guys. I'm gonna start the class today. How you guys doing? Everyone doing good? We got a good nine
Yep.
people in here today. So, all right. All right. So it's gonna give you a lot of chance to ask questions. If you have a question, just unmute yourself and just interrupt. It's okay. I don't get butthurt. So we're gonna be talking about three maneuvers today. We're gonna be talking about slow flight. We're gonna be talking about power on stalls and then power off stalls. So the three airworks that you need to know. And if we get a chance, we'll talk about steep turns. Okay. So the first maneuver we're going to talk about today is slow flight. All right. So what is slow flight? What is the purpose of slow flight? Right. So if you ever has anybody here like actually flown the airplane? Flown an airplane before? Taj, you've flown an airplane before, right? And then
Yeah, probably like 4 hours if I
yeah.
logged
So
in.
Mac flown the airplane. Beetle got some time. But basically, what slow flight is the maneuver, what it's for, is for you to feel the airplane's controls when you're at a very slow speed, because the maneuverability and the feel and the control on the yoke, it becomes very different than when you have speed, right? So when you have speed, when you're at 100 knots and you're making turns or you're going up or down or whatever, it's very responsive, the controls. If you bank left, the plane's going to bank left. If you're going to bank right, the plane's going to bank right, right? It's very responsive. However, when you go into slow flight, at a slow speed, the controls become very, very sluggish. You know, very, very wobbly and like gooey, if that makes any sense, right? So the reason why we want to become good at slow flight is because we want to be able to maneuver the airplane and be in control of the airplane when we're in a slow speed. And when will we be in a slow speed? We'll be in a slow speed when we're coming into land, right? So basically, for Warrior, those type of airplanes, like I talked about before in the other class, basically you're at 90 knots on downwind, 80 knots when you turn base, and then you're at 70 knots when you're coming down to final, and then over the numbers, you're slowing the airplane down back to like 65 degrees or whatever, right? So um, that's the reason you want to do the slow flight, okay? So basically, before you do a slow flight or before you do any maneuver, do is something called a clearing turns and a pre-maneuver checklist. All right. Has anybody heard of that pre-maneuver checklist?
I've heard
Nobody?
of clearing turns, but
Okay.
we've done the pre-maneuver checklist before. Just made sure that we're all prepped for the maneuver.
Okay, good. So a pre-maneuver checklist for a Cessna and a Piper is a little bit different, right? So for a Cessna, all you're doing is landing light on, mixtures full rich, and fuel tanks on both. You're just checking three things when you do a pre-maneuver checklist. It's basically a pre-maneuver flow. It's a flow that you're doing. And for a Piper, you're basically going from right to left on your light switches, and all you're doing is your landing light is on, your fuel pump is on, and your mixture is full rich, and you're switching your fuel tank. Like a Piper, you need to switch the fuel tanks every 30 minutes or so, but you want to switch the fuel tank to whatever tank has more fuel in it, right? So like a Cessna, once again, is gravity fed. So you got, although the plane has fuel on both sides of the wings, it's gravity fed equally into the airplane's engine when you're straight and level. However, the Piper, it only takes in one side of the tank at a time, right? So there's two ways to do the clearing turns, right? So the first thing you're going to do is your pre-maneuver checklist: landing light on, fuel pump on, mixture full rich, and fuel tank to both or whatever. Or for Cessna, landing light on, mixture full rich, and fuel tanks on both. And basically what a clearing turn is, you want to pick a reference that is straight ahead of you, right? And you're going to either make two 90-degree turns or you're going to make one full 180 turn. All right, so I'm going to just draw you this, right? So I have my whiteboard here today. So like this, it doesn't matter where you turn. Let me see if I, oh yeah. You guys see this? This is pretty good, right? Y'all see this? So it
Yeah,
doesn't matter.
yeah, I see it fine.
Okay, yeah. So it doesn't matter where you turn, right? But you want to make two 90-degree turns before you make your before you do your maneuver. This is called a clearing turn. So you're gonna move. You're gonna go straight. You're gonna bank a 90-degree turn to the left, and then to the right, just like that. Or it doesn't matter which way you do it. You can make the first turn to the right and then to the left, or a first turn to the left and then to the right. Right. So that's your that's one type of clearing turns. Right. The second clearing turn you're going to do is just a full 180. So it's going to look something like that, just a full 180. All right. So before you do any maneuver, right, when you're on your check ride, when you're teaching a student, or you're flying with an instructor, you always want to do a pre-maneuver checklist on pre-maneuver flow, and you want to do a clearing turn because you want to make sure the area is clear of traffic. There's no other students or whoever is flying in that airspace or in that area. Okay, so that's the first thing you want to do. So let's talk about slow flight, right? First thing for about slow flight, number one, you have to do it in an altitude above 1,500 feet AGL, right? So when you climb out, make sure you're at 2,000 feet, 2,500 feet is a good altitude, 3,000 feet is a good altitude. Any altitude above 1,500 feet AGL. We usually do, where I'm at, I usually do all my maneuvers around 2,500 feet, okay? 2,500 feet, do your clearing turns, right? And then, so what we're gonna do is, the first thing you're gonna do is you're gonna power the airplane. You're gonna power the airplane back to about 1,700 RPM or 1,500 RPM. It doesn't have to be exact, but you're gonna bring the power back on the airplane to about 1,700 feet, 1,700 RPM. And as you do that, what you're going to do is you're going to maintain your altitude. So if you started at 2,500 feet, you're going to pull the power back and maintain 2,500 feet. So what do you think is going to happen to the pressure of the yoke? You're going to start gaining a lot of back pressure, right? So when you gain that back pressure, what's happening is the airplane is starting to angle up. And because it's angling it up like this, even though you're keeping the same altitude, what's happening to your airspeed is your airspeed is starting to come down, right? Started this maneuver at 110 knots or 115 knots. Once you do this, your airspeed is going to start coming down to 105, 100, and it's very important to know where your airspeed's at this maneuver is because you have something called the flap operating range. So usually when we do slow flight dirty, and what dirty means, it means configuration. So that means all your flaps and all your gear down, right? So once your airspeed comes into your flap operating range, you put your first notch of flaps in. What's going to happen? The airplane is going to slow down more. Put your second notch of flaps in. It's going to slow down more. And you put your third notch of flaps in. At the whole time, what you're doing is you have an outside reference point. You have your heading bugged, right? You're looking straight ahead. You're on your heading. You have the outside reference point that's straight ahead of you in sight, and you're pulling back and your airspeed is coming down, right? And what I teach my students is I teach my students to do this maneuver around their rotation speed of the aircraft. So for like a Cessna or a Warrior, it should be around 55 knots, 60 knots, right? So let's just say 60 knots. So when the airspeed comes all the way down to about 65 knots, 63 knots, 62 knots, what you're going to do is you're going to bump that power back from 1,700 RPM back to 2,000 RPM, or around 1,900 RPM. Just going to slowly increase that power, right? So you have all your flaps in. Once you hit that slow airspeed, you're bringing your power all the way back to 1,900, 2,000 RPM. So what's going to happen? The airplane is going to start maintaining that altitude, and your goal now is to maintain the airspeed. You want to keep 60 knots at all times. 60 knots, this is where we're going to do something called pitch for airspeed and power for altitude, right? So with the back and forth movement of our yoke, if we pull back, what happens to the airspeed? The airspeed goes down. If we push forward, what happens? The airspeed goes up, right? So we're going to be basically pitching for our airspeed, and with the power, we're going to be controlling our altitude, or up and down. So I don't know if you guys know about like a helicopter, but basically a helicopter has a collector box, and basically you pull it up and down the lever. So it's the same thing. Now your throttle becomes kind of like a collector box. And what you're doing is, if you see that you're coming down from 2,500, like let's say you're at like 2,450 feet, right? You just you bump a little bit of power and just keep on pitching for that airspeed, and then basically the airplane will climb back up to 2,500 feet. And then once you're at 2,500 feet, you pull the power back to about 2,000. And the name of the game is to find a perfect power setting where you can maintain 6,000 feet, 60 knots, and 2,500 feet. All right. So, does this make sense? Anybody have questions about that?
I just have one little question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Pitch for airspeed, and what was the other one?
Power for altitude. So we're using our throttle to control our up-down movements.
Power for altitude. Okay. Yeah, no, I'm getting this though.
So it's it's a good thing to practice in your simulator. I know you got a simulator, Taj. But
yeah, I fly a lot of traffic. I mean, I like to fly commercial, but in my simulator, I fly like a lot of traffic patterns and do like maneuvers like that, just like I would in a regular Cessna.
Okay, sounds good. So just to review on this, basically the standard that we want in order the evaluation, right? In order for you to pass a check ride or whatever, right? They want you to be able to maintain the altitude plus or minus 100 feet. If you started at 2,500 feet, you got to keep 2,500 feet. Has to be you can't be off more than 10 degrees of your heading that you started with, right? So basically, when you're doing this maneuver, your feet is going to be a little active too, because when you take out the power, airplanes, you're going to be slowing down or whatever. But when you bump that little bit of power in to 2,000 RPM, your airplane might want to turn to the right, or turn to the left a little bit. So you got to have a little bit of right rudder in this maneuver. All right, I hope that made sense. It's a very simple maneuver. How you recover from slow flight is very easy. All you're gonna do is slowly increase your throttle to full RPM, so to max RPM. So you're gonna just put it all the way in, and as you're doing that, you're gonna keep your altitude. So now we're no longer pitching for airspeed. We're gonna be pitching for altitude on the recovery. So it kind of flip flops, if you know what I'm saying. Power, and then you're using your pitch to maintain your altitude. So because you're maintaining your altitude and you have full power, what's happening to your airspeed? Your airspeed is slowly starting to increase, right? And once your airspeed starts increasing, about 70 knots, you take out the last notch of flaps. Now you have 2 notches of flaps. 80 knots, you take out the other flap. 90 knots, you take out the other flap. Now you're clean. You got no more flaps. And once you get to about 100 knots or 105 or 110, whatever your starting airspeed was, you pull the power back and you're back to normal flying. All right. So basically, when you go into slow flight, pitching for airspeed, powering for altitude. However, when you're recovering, when you're going into slow flight and when you're going out of slow flight, right? It's the opposite. You're pitching back for the altitude. Okay? Does that make sense? I hope that made sense. What is it, Mac Addis? I hope that's helping you a little bit.
Yeah, it was. My last lesson was the first time I've done slow flight in a long time, and it was a little rusty, but I can't say it was the worst. But I definitely need to work on my recovery just a bit.
So basically the recovery, what you have to be careful about is when you go full power to that recovery, the airplane is going to want to swing to the left. Why is that? Because we have P factor, right? The propeller is spinning a lot faster. So that's why on the recovery, make sure that do everything slow. Increase the power just nice and easy to full power. Start putting forward pressure on the yoke so the airplane is not climbing no more, and a little bit of right rudder to keep that to be on that heading at all times. All right, Mac?
All right.
You good? Yeah. All right. Next thing we're going to talk about is a power on stall. Okay. So what a power on stall is to simulate a takeoff stall. So what happens is sometimes, you know, when you're rolling down in your Cessna, when you're rolling down in your Piper, you're full power and you're gunning down that runway. And when you rotate, sometimes you can be excessive on that back pressure. And what's going to happen is your airplane's you're going to rotate at 60 knots or 54, 56 knots or whatever. You're going to rotate, but what might happen is you might have too much back pressure, and from 56 knots, it could start going down to 50 knots and 40 knots and 30 knots if you're too excessive on that control, right? So it's to simulate that, we call it a power on stall, and we want to be safe in the matter of recovery with that. So how you set this maneuver again, the same thing. You got to do it at an altitude above 1,500 feet. So you can start this altitude at 2,000 or 2,500. And first thing you're going to do, your pre-maneuver checklist. Second thing, if you already done the clearing turns, you're good. You're going to pick an outside reference point ahead of you, right? You're going to pick an outside reference point that's straight ahead of you, and you're going to also bug the heading that you're going, right? So we got the outside reference straight ahead of us. So it could be like a cloud. It could be like, I don't know, it could be a tip of the island. It could be a part of the road, whatever. And then you got the heading bug inside to tell you. So if we're starting on a 090 heading, you got to stay on the 090 heading when we recover and throughout the whole maneuver, right? So very simple. You do this maneuver very clean. All you're going to do is full power. Once you got full power in, what's the airplane going to do again? It's going to want to turn yaw to the left. So in order to counteract that, we have a little bit of right rudder pressure on that. And all we're doing is we're pulling back. We're just slowly pulling the plane back till all the way until the plane cannot pull back no more. I know it's a little bit scary, but what's going to happen is you're going to be, the whole time, what you want to do is you want to keep the nose of the plane in front of you. How do you do that? With your rudders. You don't want the nose to slide to your left or slide to your right. You want to keep that nose straight ahead of you, and the way you're going to do that is with your rudders. And the second thing you want to do is you want to keep your wings leveled at all times, at all points. So all you're doing is pulling back, making sure your wing is not turned, your yoke is not turned, that you're straight and you're coordinated, and you're pulling back, making sure the nose is ahead of you. And your airspeed is going to go from 100 knots to 90 knots to 80 knots or 60 knots or whatever. But basically what's going to happen is you're going to start hearing the stall warning. It's going to go dee to let the plane's going to let you know that you're about to stall. And the second thing that's going to happen is your yoke is going to start shaking. And in aviation, we call it the buffet. So what's happening is your airplane is not able to get that lift, right? And then the third thing that's going to happen is your nose all of a sudden is going to just drop, just like that. So when the airplane drops just like that, what you're going to do is you're going to full power. You're not going to punch the power in, but you're going to ease the power in. And the dash of the airplane, you remember the dash of the airplane? You're going to slowly pitch that to the horizon. Just slowly. So you're going to have it a little bit under the horizon to gain the airspeed. Once you see the airspeed increasing, you're going to put the dash back onto the horizon, and then you're going to start climbing out at 80 knots or whatever. But one thing I just forgot about this maneuver is before you start the maneuver, you got to slow the airplane down to a takeoff setting. Before you start the maneuver, just like slow flight, you'll bring the airplane to about 80 knots or something, or 70 knots, and then do your power on stall. Okay, so just to show you a picture of what I mean about the recovery, I'm going to draw it for you real quick. So here's the dash. Basically, on the recovery, we want to put the dash slightly below the horizon. And once you see that airspeed climbing, the airspeed increasing, then we're going to put that dash onto the horizon, just right on it. And that should give you about an 80 knot. That should give you about an 80 knot climb or whatever. And you should be back in the game. And then you'll recover at whatever altitude. Let's say you did that maneuver at 2,500 feet. You'll just let the examiner or your instructor, you just be like, okay, I recover from this maneuver. I'll recover back at 2,900 feet or 2,800 feet or whatever. And we just want to be in control of the aircraft the whole time, right? So basically, we'll talk about the evaluation part of this maneuver. The evaluation is you got to be, get this written down. There we go. So you got to be plus or minus 10 degrees of your heading that you started. And then that's it. So basically says recover promptly after a stall occurs by simultaneously decreasing the pitch altitude, applying power as appropriate, and leveling the wings to return to a straight and level flight altitude with a minimum loss of altitude appropriate for the airplane. After a positive rate of climb, accelerate to VY, your best rate of climb, which is 80 knots for usually a Cessna and a Piper, before returning to an assigned and heading and airspeed. So that's the power on stall maneuver. Anybody has any questions on that? You all good? To myself.
No, I'm good. I got that. Makes sense.
It makes sense. All right. The next maneuver I'm going to talk about is power off stall. Does anybody know what the power off stall is for? Can anybody say? Anybody want to chip in?
For landing.
Oh, Mylene. Yeah, for landing. Great, great. Mylene, where are you from?
I'm from the Philippines.
Oh, you're from. What time is it in the Philippines?
It's 8:28 a.m.
Oh, okay. Wow, you got up early.
Yeah. For this class. It's my first class.
Oh, okay. Yeah, we did like about 7 classes, 6 classes now. How do you like it so far? Is it helpful?
Yes, I watch it in YouTube.
Yeah.
So others.
Yeah. Sounds good. All right, so let's move on to the power off stall. As Mylene said from the Philippines, is to simulate a landing, right? First thing you're going to do is the same thing. You're going to do your clearing turns, but if you accomplished it and your instructor's comfortable, you're good to go. But you want to have an outside reference point that's directly ahead of you. Bugs. So let's say 090 or whatever. This maneuver is very similar to going into slow flight. However, this time we're going to just be coming to a full stall. Okay, so and there's a little bit of difference, and I want you guys to catch it. So what's happening is, first thing, pulling the power back to 1700 RPM or 1500 RPM in your plane. And before you do anything, you want to establish a descent, a shallow descent. A lot of people get this maneuver wrong because they just try to keep the altitude throughout the whole maneuver. But first thing you want to do is you want to establish a shallow descent. The reason why we're doing this is because now we're simulating that we're on the downwind and then we're going to turn base, and then turn final, and then land on the runway. We're simulating a landing stall, basically. So that's why we have to establish a shallow descent. Anywhere between 300 and 400 feet, you're good to go. So power to 1700, descent, right? When you're in your flap operating range, first notch of flaps, right? So now we're on downwind, right? Now, as we're slowing down and we get to 80 knots, second notch of flaps. Now we're on base. Remember I talked about the airport traffic pattern, right? 70 knots, third notch of flaps, right? And so if we started at 2,500 feet, we should be around like 2,300, 2,200 by now, because we're continuing coming down, right? So we got our last notch of flaps. Then as you're coming down, you're going to tell the instructor or the examiner verbally, okay, I'm going to keep 2,100 feet. That's when I'm over the runway. And all you're going to do is you're going to pitch for that altitude, that 2,100 feet. And as you do that, you're going to slowly take the power all the way out. What's going to happen to the airplane? The airplane is going to start losing airspeed, and then you're going to start feeling the stall, just like a power on stall. You'll start hearing the stall warning that goes dee. And then the second, you're going to feel the buffet where the airplane starts shaking. And then all of a sudden, the airplane is going to drop, right? So as soon as the airplane drops, the recovery is very similar to a power on stall. You're basically going full power again, and you're slowly bringing, and when I say slowly, you want to do it slow, because if you do it too quick, you might have a secondary stall. We don't want the airplane to stall twice. But what you're doing is you're slowly, you're putting full power in, you're slowly increasing the back pressure, and same thing, you're getting your dash slightly below the horizon. Remember, we're VFR flying, right? So slightly below the horizon. Once you start seeing the airspeed increasing, you're gonna put it back up to the horizon and take out your first notch of flaps, second notch of flaps, third notch of flaps, and then you're gonna basically keep on climbing to your initial altitude. All right. So that's how you do a power off stall. Throughout this maneuver, you want to be 10 degrees within your heading, and you want to do it so you can recover above 1,500 feet AGL. That's it. Is that good? You guys understand?
Yeah, I got that.
So the secret to this game, right? It's very easy. For private pilot, only 3 maneuvers that you need to do in the air. That's air work. That's above 1,500 feet. And what is that? Slow flight, power on and power off stalls, and then steep turns. All right? And then the 3 maneuvers that you have to do, it's called ground reference maneuvers, that you do it in between 600 and 1,000 feet, is just S-turns, rectangular course, and turns around a point, right? There's only 6 maneuvers that you need to do. And the only way you can get better at this is by doing something called chair flying. And what chair flying is you just sit in the chair like how I'm just at, and then you're doing everything in your imagination, and you're just practicing so your body gets, your body starts to gain muscle memory, if that makes sense. So just again, once again, if I'm doing a power on stall, right? I'm in my airplane. I'm in my imaginary airplane, right? I have an outside reference point. I have my heading bug. I'm increasing the full power. I'm slowly bringing in that back pressure all the way. The nose of the airplane is rising up. I want to keep the nose centered in front of me. I don't want it to go to the left, go to the right. I want to keep my wings level. I got my rudders to control that. I hear the stall. I hear the airplane shaking, and then the airplane stalls. And when I recover, I'm just slowly putting forward pressure in, getting my below the horizon and recovering. So just like how I'm saying it, you guys want to keep on talking this through and keep on doing it just verbally. And this is called chair flying, okay? Since we have time, last thing I'm going to talk about is steep turns. A lot of people have trouble with steep turns, right? The reason why they have trouble with steep turns is because they have their eyes inside of the cockpit and not outside. This is a private pilot check ride, so it's for your VFR ticket. So you got to do this maneuver with your eyes outside. But once you have your eyes super inside the cockpit, what's going to happen is you're going to get behind the aircraft. So when you do this maneuver, you want to be 2 seconds outside, 0.5 seconds inside, 2 seconds outside, 0.5 seconds inside, just like that. So a lot of people, they mess up this maneuver because they don't know where their reference point is on this maneuver, okay? And I'm going to show you that so you guys do not make the same mistake, all right? So here's my airplane. You guys see it? It's a pretty big, wide airplane, all right? So basically for this maneuver, same thing. You got to have an outside reference point directly ahead of you, and then you got to have your heading bugged, okay? And what you're going to do is you're going to, when you turn to the right, when you're making a steep turn to the right, your basic outside reference point is going to be the side of your dash, where the window of the airplane connects, right? And what's going to happen is basically you have to turn into a 45-degree bank angle. So you're going to keep the nose of the aircraft where it's at, and you're going to start your bank. And once you get to about 30 degrees of bank, you're going to start adding a little bit of back pressure and a little bit of power. So for this maneuver, it's good to do it at your maneuvering speed for the aircraft, which is 100 knots or 95 knots or whatever. And we want to maintain airspeed, and we want to maintain the bank angle, and we want to maintain the rollout heading. So a lot of people struggle with this, but it's going to basically look like this. So if this line is my horizon, banking this right here to the horizon the whole time. And then you're going to roll out about 20 degrees from your rollout. So if you're rolling out at 090, you're going to be rolling out about zeros on the 70 heading, 070 heading, and back to level flight. And you turn to your left. I'm going to draw this real quick. You're going to use basically in between the propeller. You're going to use in between the propeller and your dash. So you got your propeller in the middle and your dash, this midway point as your reference point. And you're basically going to paint the sky with that when you're banking to the left. So just to show you an example. Basically, if that's the horizon, right? This is how you're going to be banking it to the left, and you want to hug, or you want to keep that point on the horizon throughout the turn, and about 20 degrees or 15 degrees before your rollout point, you're going to start rolling it out. Same thing. Either you're going to the left or you're going to the right. Keep the nose of the aircraft where it's at, wherever it's at. So when you're in level flight, you're 4 fingers from the dash to the horizon anyways, right? But you're going to keep the airplane where it's at. You're going to start your turn nice and easy, very coordinated. And once you hit about 30 degrees, bump a little bit of power in and increase a little bit of back pressure, and just maintain that bank angle of 45 degrees and maintain your reference point on that horizon. So if you have it on the horizon, if you see that point going up above the horizon, you know that you're climbing. If you see that point going down the horizon, you know that you're descending. So therefore, you can react much quicker than your instruments, because your instruments are all delayed a little bit, right? But what's not delayed is your visual reference point and your visual point in the airplane. Basically, what I said is look 2 seconds outside, 0.3 seconds inside. 2 seconds outside, 0.2 seconds inside. And just like that. All right, guys? Any questions?
I'm good.
Oh, what's up, Beto? Is that Beto?
No, that was me.
Oh, okay. Gosh, okay. Oh, thanks, Dave. So, yeah. So at this time, I mean, that's all the stuff I had for today. Maneuvers that I want to talk about. Basically, left now is weight and balance and flight cross-country flight planning. And that's basically all of the ground lessons that you need to know. You need to brush up on a little bit of the weather stuff, a little bit of, you know, what are stable conditions, what are unstable conditions, you know, how do you know something's going to be turbulent, how do you know it's not going to be turbulent. Just a little bit of aviation knowledge that you need to know, but it's all in the PX, and it's not that bad of a read. I just read it today. And then that's it. Like, that's all the ground you need to know, and you'll be good to go. So at this time, if you guys have any questions, please ask. The floor is yours.
Yeah, I got a question there.
Did you? Oh, wait, hold on one second. What is it? Dave just asked. Did you talk in an earlier lesson about getting the physical exam and where one can get it? All right. So the physical exam is called a medical. Where you can get your medical in the States is basically on Google. Type in AME, Aviation Medical Examiners. So AME examiners or AME doctors in my area. It should populate a list on Google, and then you just make an appointment. And you go for that exam. When you go, if you're going to become an airline pilot, request a Class 1 medical. If you're going to just be a recreational flyer, request the third class medical. And basically, if you are under 40, you can get that exam. It's good for 12 calendar months. But if you're over 40, you got to get it every 6 months for the first class. And then, yeah. So basically, the cost should be around $200. If that makes sense. All right, Karim, the floor is yours.
So this regarding these kind of like the written part of the license, right? For the exams, how are the exams structured? Because I'm in Ireland, so in EASA, it's the exams are all multiple choice questions, you know.
Yeah, where are you at?
Ireland.
Ireland?
Yeah.
Okay, so basically in the States, how it works is full question test, and it has 100 questions, and you just need to get a 70% or higher. The way you study for it is you download a app on your iPhone, on your iPad, either the ASA Private Pilot Prepware or Sporty's Private Prepware or King's School Private Prepware. And what those prepware has, it has all the question bank. It has all the question banks for that test. So it has about 1,500 questions. And so if you memorize those 1,500 questions, you'll be good for that 100-question test.
Oh, okay. Is that for not just the PPL, but does that continue as well? For example, if you do your CPL and so on, it's all the same.
It's all the same. They have apps for that.
Okay.
Okay.
As I know, from July on in EASA anyway, for ATPLs, the exams are going to be changed. Instead of they're going to have you do more writing as well instead of choosing the correct.
Oh, where? In Ireland?
Yeah, in Europe now. They're going to change that.
Okay, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't think so in the States.
All right, okay. Thanks, anyway.
All right. David says, David says, when plane stall, does the nose go down by itself or do you pitch down? Good question, Daniel. Basically, what's going to happen is when it stalls, you have no more lift, so you have no more control. It doesn't go up or down or whatever, right? So when it stalls, what's going to happen? The nose is going to automatically just drop. That makes sense, Daniel Valdez. All right, we're good to go. All right, I guess that's good. I'll see you guys next time. I'm actually going to work on Wednesday, so I don't know if I could do the next class, but they got me on a trip, so I'll be flying down to Charlotte. If anybody's in Charlotte, let me know. All right. Take care, guys. I hope you guys enjoy the class.